And we are back after a break. I'm together with Marco, the Sanctis, who is CTO at Mondra and also Microsoft MVP. And Marco will give a speech about building SaaS application with ASP.NET Core and Azure. So I don't waste Marco's time. And Marcos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So guys, welcome. Thanks for having me. I hope you are enjoying the conference so far, and I will hope that you will keep enjoying it for the next for the remainder of the day. So my name is Marco. I've been a Microsoft MVP for the last 13 years, so it's quite a long time, and I've been working in the past few years with a company called Mondra. These guys built a software as a service product, and I was like, we were facing so many interesting challenges that I was like, well, I need to make a talk about it, and here I am. That's the reason why why I'm presenting this topic today. So lots of interesting stuff. We're going to use a playground to play with it, which looks crap. I get it. It's basically a clone of Slack made by someone who can't design a proper website, right? But it will still serve the purpose of understanding what the challenges are for this type of application. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a software that can run in a multi-tenant fashion. So we can have multiple clients, multiple companies, for example, coexisting in the same infrastructure. And when that happens, obviously the implication is that the data will also coexist in the same physical infrastructure. And we need to ensure data isolation. We don't want data from company A to be leaked to data to company B. Right. The other thing is that we probably want to provide a fancy custom domain to our user, or a customized domain, right? So we will see how we can set up a delivery network in Azure to achieve that. And last but not least, no products will be successful if we don't support, especially if we're building a product for the business, for the enterprise, if we don't support a corporate single sign-on. So the days in which we were asking username and password to our users are long gone. We need to support their single sign-on, and we will see hopefully how to achieve that. Why do I say hopefully? Because this is a talk which was designed for quite a longer running time, like 50 minutes. So I'll try to condense as much as I can. Forgive me if I go too fast. I'll see if we can cover it. Otherwise, you will have the demos and the slides, and you can look at it by yourself. All right, so let's start very quickly talking about data isolation. But before we do that, let me just remind you that this is not the perfect solution, not necessarily, right? This is one possible solution. Hopefully, it will serve you as an inspiration when you face similar problems if you're building these type of products. All right, so I was saying data isolation, keeping data siloed, isolated. Why is that difficult? Could we not just stack a company ID field in all our table and just filter like in this query here? Well, we definitely can, right? And we will do that. However, things are usually a bit more complicated than that, because obviously this query is pretty trivial, but you might have complex joins and things like that. And when that happens, when you make a mistake in your join clause, for example, or perhaps in this case you forget your company ID, what happens? Well, what happens is that even if your currently logged in user is from Acme as a company, it will still see data from Contoso and Fabricam, so other clients. And this is obviously a problem for the reputation of your software. It's something where you don't want to be. So what can we do to improve this? Well, there's a feature in the SQL Server, and also in pretty much all the most modern databases, called row-level security, which we can adopt to harden the security around our data isolation strategy. So what is this row-level security? Well, row-level security means that we can, the basic idea is that we can associate a context to the currently connected user. So for example, here I'm saying that this user here is from company Acme, right? And then I can define a policy in the database that says only return a row if the company ID of that row matches the data in the context, right? So this means that for a user whose context is Acme, what the database will return is only rows with Acme in the company ID. When the user is Contoso, a different company, that user will see a different window over the data. And this is basically what we're trying to what we will try to adopt in the tool to make our data more secure. So let's jump to Visual Studio and have a look. Right. So I'm in Visual Studio, and well, let me start the application first, and let's have a quick look at how it's built. Right. So the application is just it's a normal front-end application, right, which I've built in Blazor, but Blazor is not really the starring character in this presentation. It could be literally any front-end technology would work, right, React, whatever, right, the same concepts will apply. And we have an ASP.NET Core Web API project in the backend, right? This is how the application looks like. So at the minute, we're still passing the company ID in the query string. Bear with me, we will sort that out later during the talk. But for now, let's just accept this, right? And as you can see, I'm in Acme, and I see, for example, the rooms for Acme, right? I can get into these rooms and see what the messages are, okay? And then I can just type a different company ID, say Contoso, right? The application will reload, and I will see the data from Contoso here, okay? In the backend, right, what we're doing is, let's have a quick look at the only controller that I have in this demo, right? I have this rooms controller. I'm using Entity Framework, but again, it's not really a must. You can use whatever technique to access the database that you want. Dapper would do, right? And what I'm doing here is just basically filtering by company ID, right? And to retrieve the current company ID of the user, I'm abstracting the concept of retrieving the company ID behind this interface iCompany context accessor. If we quickly go and have a look at it, right, it just returns basically the company ID here. And at the minute, I have a very basic version of it, which retrieves the company ID from the routing, from the path, okay? And just provides that back. Okay, so in my rooms controller, I have my where conditions in place. Very simply, if I forget this where condition, right, and I try to rerun the application at this point, what will happen, as you can guess, is that as soon as this builds, go back here, yeah, and even if I'm a Contoso here on the top, as you can see, I'm seeing all the data like we were expecting for all the clients, and this is really, really bad. Okay, so how does row-level security help us on this? So let's jump for 1 second into Management Studio, and let's try to see how we can implement it. So the first thing that we need to do is creating a schema, which we're going to call security. The reason for that will be clear in a second. You can call it whatever you want, by the way, right? And then the following step is creating a function like this one, which will return a row, for example, of the rooms table, right? If the user will need to return 1, sorry, when applied to the rooms table, if the user has the permissions to see that row. So let's imagine that in my rooms table, for example, I have my company ID here, right? And let's assume that this company ID for each of the rows is passed to this function, right? The function will return 1, either if I'm an admin of the database, right? Or if my session context, which is basically a dictionary, right? This is a new concept, perhaps, for most of you. The property company ID of the session context is the same as the company ID of the room, okay? So I just created this function. And I have another one for messages, right? It's similar, but not exactly the same, because here I don't have the company ID, right? It's indirectly related to the company ID because I have the room ID, right? I will not go into the details because we have a very short time, but please go and have a look at the code by yourselves, right? So I have these 2 tables. I create messages and rooms. I've created 2 functions in those tables. And now I can finally create my first security policy, right? I'm creating a security policy called room filter, right? Which applies to the rooms table, for example, right? And here I'm saying, yeah, apply the function that we just defined, passing the company ID field, right? As you can see, this is the company ID column in that rooms table. So it will pass that company ID field to the function to see if the user can see the row or not, right? So I'm doing this for the rooms, I'm doing this for the messages, right? And now that I have everything in place, right, the only thing I need to do is making sure that I have my application is using a different account to access the database. Why is that? Because we've just seen in the definitions of these functions, right, that if the user is an admin, like I am now, I will be able to see everything and effectively bypass the row level security, right? So I needed to create this user chat app, okay? Once everything is in place, now I go as an admin, I hit F5 here, and as you can see, I can see everything. Let me zoom this in a little bit. So I can see Acme data, Contoso data, and all the messages in there, right? However, let's now switch to chat app as a user, right? And let me set a value of Acme to this company ID with this stored procedure called the SP-set session context, right? I do this. Now I execute exactly the same query as before, right? But this time, as you can see, the database is only returning the Acme data to me, right? If I was a Contoso user, right, same query, and I would see only the Contoso data, okay? And as you probably, I haven't mentioned it, right? But in the policy, I've also defined a couple of rules to block inserts and updates, right, into these tables if you're not authorized, right? Deletes will also implicitly work because for a delete you need to have access to that table. So the filter predicate will sort the delete out for you. So what it means is that now that I am a Contoso user, if I try to insert, for example, a room in Acme, right, or a message, I get blocked natively from the database. Okay, this is also something that we want. Okay, the important thing though is what happens when I forget to set the session context. I think of this pretty much as the similar thing as I have a bug in my query and I forget the where condition. Okay, so in my case, I haven't set the session context at all, right? Can you guess what the database will return here? Well, hopefully you've guessed it right. The database will not return anything in my case. Okay, so these tables will look empty, and this is the thing that actually prevents big errors, right, from happening. Obviously, the data is still there. I revert, I go back as a normal database user, I run the same query again, and the data is all there. Okay, so now I'm an admin. Okay, so we've set everything up on the database. Let's see what we need to do on the application to have it working with row level security. So the first thing, as you remember, I have I need to use a different account. So not my admin account, but my chat app account. So the first thing I need to do is setting this connection string into my my connection string here. And the other thing is that I needed to set this session context in some way. Now, we can do it in multiple ways. In my case, I'm using Entity Framework, as I said, and Entity Framework has a handy feature to do that called Command Interceptor. So if we look at this class that I created here, right, Session Context Interceptor, what does it do? Well, it inherits from a DB Command Interceptor, and this class will be called by Entity Framework just before sending the command to the database. So basically, think of your link query, right? With your expression tree, EF will parse that expression tree, generate the SQL query, and then will call one of these three methods: non-query executing, reader executing, or scalar executing, depending on the nature of the command, passing this, which is the command generated by EF. And what I'm doing here is that before executing the command, right, I'm calling this add session context method, in which I'm doing a little SQL injection, if you want, right? So I'm just injecting this exec sp session set session context, passing the company ID, which I'm retrieving from the same company context accessor that we've seen before, right? So, and then obviously after that, I'm just executing the command that entity framework has generated. Okay, so all I need to do in my case is telling EF that I want to use this interceptor, right? So let me relaunch my application, right? So rebuilding it, the application is reloading, and now I'm in Contoso, right? I can only see the data of Contoso. As you can see, the two tables from Contoso are here. But if you remember, the astonishing thing is that I still have the bug here that I had forcibly introduced before, right? But it's a row-level security that is compensating my omission, and it's basically kicking in and preventing any data leaks. Okay, so this is the first achievement for today, right? Having data isolation implemented in a proper way. Now let's go and have a look at the second goal, which is our delivery network. Okay, so for our delivery network, what we want to achieve is basically, so we're gonna deploy our application most likely, for example, in Azure via on a couple of app services, right? One for the UI and one for the API. Okay, the user will access a custom domain like acme.enterprisechat.com or contoso.enterprisechat.com or literally anything.enterprisechat.com. And what we basically want to achieve is connecting the two dots, right? So we want the traffic to be routed from these domains to these servers. Okay, so how do we achieve that? Well, for the next part of the presentation, I'm not going to do it live on the portal because it would take time. I've grabbed some screenshots here on the presentation so that you can download the slides and use it as a reference should you need to do a similar thing in the future. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is setting up a DNS, right? You can use whichever DNS you want. GoDaddy will work, for example. I'm using an Azure DNS simply because it's better integrated with the rest of the services, right? And then we need a public IP address, right? Like this one, and we need to configure what is called a star domain on that DNS. So we need to say that whichever subdomain I'm using, right, you always go to this IP address. So what this will do for us is that if I go to the terminal, right, and I do resolve name, let me zoom this in a little bit. Resolve name acme.enterprisechat, you will get this IP address, right? If you do the same for Contoso, you will get the same IP address. And if you do the same for whichever stuff you want, you will get the same IP address without having you to change anything, right? Okay, then we needed to route the traffic. And in order to route the traffic, my current architecture is based on a service in Azure called Application Gateway. Now, Application Gateway is a substantially complex service, which contains a lot of sub-services in it, right? But I will try to guide you through the setup process. So the first thing that we need to do is spinning up a listener. What is a listener? A listener is a component that listens to an IP address, right? So we need to configure it to listen to the HTTPS port of our public IP address that we have just created. Okay, so far so good. Now, since we want to use HTTPS, what do we need? We need a certificate. right? And the recommendation here is to use a wildcard certificate so that we don't have to create a certificate on demand each and every time. They might be a little bit more expensive, or you can do like me and generate one wildcard certificate for free with Let's Encrypt, for example. And once you have that certificate, where do you store certificates in Azure? You store them in Key Vault. Now, Key Vault obviously exposes this data as in the form of a protected REST API. So we need to log in some way in order to be authorized to consume that certificate, and we're going to do that via a managed identity, right? So an identity which is managed by Azure, and we don't need to manually rotate keys or set passwords or things like that. Okay, and once we've created that managed identity, we can connect all the dots here in the listener configuration, where we say, okay, select the certificate from Key Vault, we give it a name, we select which Key Vault we want to use, we select which managed identity we want to use to access the Key Vault, and this is the certificate that I've stored in Key Vault. Okay, so after all of that is done, our listener will be able to expose a valid certificate to the browser, so the browsers will not see that as a warning. Cool. Now, next step. Next step, we need to route the traffic, either the UI or API traffic, towards the web servers. And in order to do that, I'm just using a simple path-based rule, right, in which I'm saying if the path contains the API fragment, send all the requests to the API web server. If it contains or anything else, goes to the UI. And in order to do that, there's a routing rules section in Application Gateway where you can do exactly this, right? So in my case, if I zoom in, as you can see, I've configured this path as a target for the API pool, right here. And in case no paths are matched, everything will go to the UI pool here. Okay, this one. Cool. So we're almost there, right? The last thing that we need to do is basically handling this Acme or Contoso or whatever subdomain to tell our application how this will basically what is the company that the user is trying to access. All right. So transform this Acme subdomain basically in the company ID or the fragment in the URL that we've seen before when we were running the application locally. All right. So how do we do that? Well, there is another feature called URL rewrites, right, that we're going to configure. And the URL rewrites are basically if then conditions that we can set up in Application Gateway, right? So in my case, for example, I created an if condition, right, in which I'm saying, look, if the host, right, equals to this .star.enterprisechat.com, this is basically a regular expression, right? So we're capturing all the potential subdomains here, .enterprisechat.com, right? So if that condition is met, then what you need to do is add a query string to the URL, right? And that query string will look like company ID equals to, and this var host 1. This is basically the first variable that I've captured when looking at the host. So it's basically this bit here. Okay, so it will basically translate acme.enterprisechat.com into equals to company ID equals to Acme. Okay. There's one last thing before we look at this working, which is related to the fact that the URL rewrites are not redirect. So we're not redirecting the user from this URL to this URL here. So it's something that happens on the server. Okay, so this means that in order for our application for the UI application to be able to see that URL, we will need a server-side component, server-side logic for it, because otherwise Blazor, or your React, which runs on the browser, will always see acme.enterprisechat.com. Okay, so the idea is then to host our UI application into an ASP.NET website, which will just serve the single page application, right? And then we can expose a configuration endpoint like this. So what is the idea? Say that the user connects to contoso.enterprisechat.co.uk, right? What we're going to do as a first thing is making a call from the browser to contoso.enterprisechat.com/configuration, okay? Application gateway will get that URL. As we've seen, we'll transform it into this request on the server, on the server-to-server channel, right, before sending it to the Azure web app. And here we can return some configuration which is specific to Contoso, like, for example, the name of the company, the API, URL, etc. There would be other things for the security part, right? So that the UI can configure itself during the startup. Okay, so let's see how this works. Unfortunately, enterprisechat.com was quite expensive, so I hope you don't mind if I use enterprisechat.co.uk, which is way cheaper. Okay, so let's see all of this in action. So let's go to the browser. One sec. And trust me, I've implemented exactly the same things that we've seen in the slides, right? So let me go to acme.enterprisechat.co.uk and let's see what happens, right? So the application is starting up. As you can see, it's making a call to configuration, right? This is a server-to-server call, and configuration is returning, okay, the company is Acme, right? And this is the URL you should use for the backend, okay? And same goes for contoso.enterprisechat.co.uk, okay? Same configuration endpoint, but this time is Contoso, okay? How is this implemented on in code? Let me just quickly switch to a different branch, and let me go to delivery here. Well, the logic is relatively simple. So I've created this new project, enterprise chat UI.server, right, which returns a static page with the Blazor page, right, and has this configuration controller, right, which for now is really basic. So it just returns based on the company D. It returns this JSON here. Company D equals to that. Enterprise chat API URL is this one. So it's really simple. And in Blazor, what I'm doing, for those of you who have some experience with Blazor, but again, it's exactly a similar thing for React or for Angular or whatever else. What I'm doing is that during the startup of the application, right, this is the bootstrap of the application in Blazor, I'm creating an HTTP client, which points to the same base address and the /configuration path, right? And then I'm calling this endpoint and add that response to my configuration, okay? So this allows me to basically access my configuration, my specific configuration for the company as like any other configuration setting. So for example, for the API URL, I'm just reading the configuration value string of enterprise chat API. Okay, it's basically just that. All right, so again, I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. I still have a five-ish minutes in the presentation, so let me just quickly give you an overview of the security aspect. All right, so this part achieves the delivery goal that we had. Before I start talking about security, let me see if I can quickly deploy also this branch which contains the secured version of my application. All right, so I need to open the terminal. Bear with me 1 second. I need to trigger this deploy.bat. Okay, let's go back to the slides 1 sec. And let's talk about enterprise-ready security, corporate single sign-on. So what is the problem that we have here? Is that obviously our clients will use a number of different identity providers, right? Some of them will be in Office 365, and therefore Azure Active Directory, they would be on might be in Auth0, Okta, ADFS, you name them. I mean, there's a plethora of different options for corporate single sign-on, which are really relevant for the industry. Now, I could build an application that is capable of interacting with all of them, right? But obviously, this direct integration could be potentially quite problematic for all these reasons. The alternative is to use a bridge identity provider. In my case, I'm using Azure Active Directory B2C for the demo, but you can use anything. So, for example, in Mondra, we are using Auth0, right? So it depends on what your system is, right, and what you need to do. But to keep it simple, let's just use Azure AD B2C. And the advantage of this is that your application will always interact only with Azure AD B2C, right? So only one identity provider to deal with, and you leave the responsibility to Azure AD B2C to integrate with Okta, Auth0, Azure, the client Active Directory, whatever it's needed. Okay, so it might be that not all of you are familiar with B2C, and I will try to keep it simple so that you can still follow it. We're going to use 3 features of B2C in order to implement that. I will make it on time to only show you 2 of them. Right. The first feature is called identity providers. So in B2C, you can integrate your application with a number of different identity providers, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft accounts, right, etc. But there's an important option here, which is a generic OpenID Connect provider, right? And here, the idea is to create a specific OpenID Connect provider, right, per client. So each of your clients will have their own identity provider configured in B2C. And in order to create that, the good news is that we only need 3 info from the client, right? One is the metadata URL of your identity provider, of their identity provider, and they will need to create the typical application with a client ID and client secret on their end and pass us these details. Well, right? If we do this, the good news is that we can work with any identity provider which supports OpenID Connect, okay? Which kind of makes our tool really, really flexible. Then the second feature we need to use is called user flow, right? We want to enforce the usage of a particular identity provider depending on which URL I'm accessing, right? Acme, contoso.enterprisechat.co.uk, etc. Right? And user flow is exactly this thing. So it defines what is the flow for the login, right? And as you can see, also here, I'm creating different user flows per company, Acme and Contoso. And for each of the user flows, I'm saying what is the only identity provider to be used. And how do I tell what user flow the UI should use? By the configuration that we've seen before, right? Together with company the API URL, now I'm passing also this third parameter, okay? Right, so let's try to see it in action, right? So the application is deployed. I need to open the browser, bear with me, and I go this time to an incognito window. Very quick demo, 2 minutes left. Let's see if we can make it. So I go to acme.enterprisechat.co.uk here. So the application loads. And if we look at the calls here, it's calling configuration. It's saying, okay, user, let me show it here, user this Azure AD B2C configuration, right? And the user flow to use is the one for Acme. And as you can see, it has redirected me to my corporate Azure Active Directory, where I can log in with my email address. I get prompted for multi-factor authentication. This is passwordless, actually, right? I say, yes, okay, logged in, yes, and I'm in. hopefully, very quickly. I run the same thing for Contoso, right? So this has logged me here. Contoso is using Okta, same setting. It's just returning a different user flow. And this time, if we give it time to load, let me try to refresh this one sec. Oh yeah, here we go. It's pointing me to Okta for the login. Guys, I think that the time is up. So we really don't have any more time to discuss other things. And we didn't have time for Q&A. That's my bad. But feel free to contact me either by email, grab a screenshot of this, right? Contact me either by email or on Twitter for any questions you have, or if you ever want to work with me, get in touch. Here in this URL, you will be able to download the code and the slide for the demo, and hopefully it will be a bit more clear after you look into the code without haste. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I wish you all the very best for your careers and for the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your presentation. Thank you very much for your participation on this session. And as always, we count on you, and your feedback is very important. So please rate Marco's presentation using stars under the video player, and see you on next talk.